text came in just as I was helping a customer pick out a scarf at my boutique. I'm leaving you and moving to Miami with my 20-year-old girlfriend. I've already drained our joint account. Haha. My hands didn't tremble as I read it. My voice didn't crack as I cheerfully rang up Mrs. Peterson's purchase and wrapped it in our signature silver paper. The only visible sign that my husband of 12 years had just detonated our marriage via text was the slight tightening around my eyes. I waited until Mrs. Peterson left, the bell above the door chiming softly before I typed my response. Good luck. My name is Claire, and at 38 years old, I'd just received the most casually cruel goodbye message imaginable. But while Mark was probably sitting back somewhere, smugly picturing me in tears, crumbling over his betrayal, I was calmly locking up my boutique for the day. The signs had been there for months, the suspicious late nights at the office that never matched up with his paycheck, the sudden obsession with the gym, the new clothes carefully chosen to shave a decade off his appearance, all desperate attempts to cling to his fading youth. 3 months ago, I'd found the first real proof, a dinner receipt for two at a high-end steakhouse on a night he'd sworn he was working late. That same night, I quietly opened a new account at a different bank. A week later, when he casually suggested we combine our finances for simplicity, I smiled sweetly and agreed, all while funneling my personal savings into my new private account. The joint account he'd just so proudly emptied. It held exactly enough to maintain the illusion, 2 months' worth of deposits and no more. Everything else, including a meticulously kept record of every suspicious transaction, had long been moved out of his reach. My phone buzzed again. Don't bother begging. Melissa and I leave tomorrow. I'll send for my things later. Melissa, the new receptionist at his office, the one with the baby voice and the spray tan. I'd met her at last year's Christmas party, watched her giggle too loudly at Mark's tired jokes, saw the way her hand lingered just a second too long on his arm. She was young enough to call me Mom, and naive enough to believe she was special. I didn't bother replying. Instead, I called my lawyer, the one I'd quietly consulted 2 months ago after I found hotel charges on our credit card from a weekend Mark had supposedly spent at a corporate retreat. It's time, I said calmly. He made his move. The papers are ready, she replied without missing a beat. Shall I have him served in Miami? No rush, I said, smiling faintly. Let him think he's won first. Another text rolled in. I know this is hard for you. Let's be honest, you're not getting any younger. At least you've got your little shop to keep you busy. My little shop. The boutique I built from nothing. The one that now turned a higher profit than his middle management salary ever had. The one whose business accounts had never touched our joint finances. I smiled again, imagining the certified letters that would be waiting for him in Miami. Let him have his victory lap. That evening, I walked through the house, my house, the one I'd inherited from my grandmother, the one I'd made sure was kept in my name alone, despite Mark's constant hints about putting both our names on the deed just to make things fair. Another instinct that had paid off. I sorted through the paperwork my lawyer would need, stacking it neatly on the kitchen table. Among the folders, I found our wedding album, a relic from a life I no longer recognized. Mark looked so different back then, before the spray tans and the muscle shirts 2 sizes too small, before he'd traded in family dinners for protein shakes and overpriced watches. He was trying so hard to be someone new, someone young, edgy, desirable, and all he'd accomplished was becoming a middle-aged cliché. My phone buzzed over and over, each new text more condescending than the last. I've been planning this for months. Melissa gets me in ways you never could. You'll be fine. Maybe you'll find someone more your speed. Already told my family. They agree we just grew apart. It's nobody's fault, really. I screenshotted every message, adding them to the growing evidence folder I'd started months ago. Let him keep talking. Every smug word was another gift for my lawyer. The final text made me laugh out loud. Oh, and I used the joint credit card to book our flights and the hotel. Consider it my farewell gift. LOL perfect. I dialed the credit card company. Hi, this is Claire Harrison. I need to report fraudulent charges and cancel a card immediately. Of course, ma'am. Can you specify which charges? 2 first-class tickets to Miami booked today, and a luxury hotel reservation at the Royal Palm. I paused for effect. Oh, and I'll need to remove my husband as an authorized user. Do you have any documentation to support your fraud claim? Absolutely. I have a series of text messages from my husband proudly admitting that he used our joint credit card to book a romantic getaway with his girlfriend after draining our bank account. Would you like to forward those messages to our fraud department? I'd be delighted. With the phone still in my hand, I stared out the window, the city lights reflecting off the glass. Mark thought he'd blindsided me, that I was the helpless wife left crying in the wreckage. But I wasn't broken, I was prepared. And soon he'd find out exactly how prepared I was. The customer service rep's professional tone couldn't quite hide the slight satisfaction in her voice as she cancelled the charges. By tomorrow, Mark and Melissa would show up at the airport, only to find their first-class tickets invalid, their beachfront hotel reservation wiped from existence. I was halfway through pouring myself a glass of wine, the good bottle I'd been saving for a special occasion, when my phone lit up again. Don't worry about the house, Mark's text read, dripping with condescension. I'll let you stay there until you find something smaller. I actually laughed out loud. Did he genuinely believe he had any claim to my grandmother's house? The house that had been in my name, in my family, for generations? His ego really had swelled to ridiculous proportions. Another text followed, even more delusional. And I know the shop means a lot to you. We can work out a fair payment for my half, his half, the business I built from the ground up, the boutique funded by my own savings, grown through my own work, while Mark called it my little hobby. I took a long sip of wine. Tomorrow he'd be introduced to some basic concepts of property law, and the reality that his fantasy of cashing out on my success was just that, a fantasy. That night I slept better than I had in months. Morning brought a flurry of texts, each angrier than the last. What the hell did you do to our credit card? The airline says our tickets are cancelled. The hotel won't honour our reservation. Answer me, Claire. I silenced my phone, set it face down on the counter and went to work. Fridays were always busy at the boutique, and a fresh shipment of designer handbags had just arrived. While Mark and his toddler girlfriend were scrambling for a place to stay, I had customers to serve and new displays to create. Life and business continued. Around lunchtime, the phone rang again. This time, it was Mark's mother. Claire, dear, she started, her voice dripping with performative sympathy. Mark told us everything. How controlling you've been, how you drove him away, and now he says you're being vindictive, messing with his travel plans. I set the phone on speaker and continued arranging handbags in the window display. Did he mention that he emptied our joint account without warning? I asked calmly. Or that he charged first-class flights and a luxury hotel for himself and his girlfriend to our shared credit card? The silence stretched long enough for me to place an entire shelf's worth of handbags. Well, she finally said, he said you left him no choice, that you've been cold and distant for months. I could have screamed. Instead, I took a slow breath. Barbara, I said, voice perfectly even, I have copies of his texts. Would you like me to read them to you? The one where he brags about emptying our account? Or maybe the one where he makes fun of my age? Another silence then. Well, I did tell him that was a bit cruel. I appreciate the call, Barbara, I said, my patience running thin, but my lawyer advised me to keep contact with Mark and his family to a minimum during the divorce proceedings. Divorce? Already? Yes. Goodbye, Barbara. By mid-afternoon, Mark's sister, Amanda, was already spreading gossip to mutual friends. From what I heard, Mark and Melissa were stuck at a budget motel near the airport. Their glamorous escape to Miami reduced to a layover from hell. Apparently, Mark tried to use his personal credit cards to book a last-minute room upgrade, only to discover all his cards were maxed out. A fact I'd quietly noted months ago when I started pulling his financial statements. My lawyer called with an update. "The emergency hearing is scheduled for Monday," she said, her voice all business. "Between his admission of draining the account and the documented credit card fraud, we have a strong case to freeze all remaining assets." "Has he been served yet?" I asked. "Not yet, but we'll serve him at his new motel address." There was a note of amusement in her voice. "And speaking of addresses, Melissa's been posting their adventure all over social media. Her comments about you are colourful." I smiled into the phone. Perfect. Screenshot everything. I had my own file, a year's worth of records, text exchanges and receipts, all neatly catalogued. Mark had been so busy orchestrating his dramatic escape, so certain I'd crumble, that it never occurred to him I was quietly documenting every move he made. Then, like clockwork, another text came in. "You think you're so smart, but I made copies of all your boutique's financial records. Half that business is mine." I forwarded the text to my lawyer. "Add it to the folder," I said. "Let him learn what separate property means the hard way." The emergency hearing on Monday was even better than I'd imagined. Mark arrived wearing his new younger man wardrobe, a too-tight blazer over a designer tee, jeans that strained at the seams, and loafers that belonged on a 20-something influencer, not a man pushing 45. Melissa sat in the hallway, flipping through her phone, her fake tan looking out of place under the courthouse's fluorescent lights. My lawyer was flawless, calm, prepared, and devastatingly thorough. She laid out Mark's texts, his gleeful confession about draining the account, the credit card fraud, the hotel receipts, and the carefully maintained separation of my business finances from our personal ones. Mark's lawyer, some hapless guy he'd hired off Google, tried to paint me as vindictive. "She's retaliating," he said, "using this as an excuse to punish my client." My lawyer didn't even blink. "She's not retaliating," she said smoothly. "She's protecting her legally separate assets and presenting clear evidence of financial misconduct. There's no punishment here, just consequences." The judge examined the deed to the house, the incorporation documents for the boutique, the pristine accounting records, all of it proof that Mark had never had a claim to my business or the house, no matter what stories he told himself. "Mr. Harrison," the judge said, turning to him directly, "do you deny using shared funds to finance your travel with your girlfriend?" Mark shifted uncomfortably in his too-tight blazer. I was just trying to make a clean break." The judge's brow lifted. "By committing financial fraud?" Mark's lawyer tried again. "The business grew during their marriage." "My client contributed." "The business was founded before the marriage," my lawyer interrupted smoothly. "Every record shows it remained entirely under Mrs. Harrison's control. My client maintained her finances separately, against Mr. Harrison's frequent objections." I didn't need to speak a word. I just sat there, calm and composed, while Mark's face turned redder with each passing minute. The judge's ruling was swift. All shared assets frozen. Mark ordered to return the drained funds within 24 hours. But that money's gone, Mark protested. We spent it. Then you'll need to figure it out, the judge cut him off. Outside the courtroom, I caught just enough of Melissa's voice to hear her ask, "What about Miami?" Mark's answer was drowned out by the sharp click of my heels on the marble floor as I walked past them, my lawyer at my side, my business still mine, my house still mine, my life, finally, mine again. She posted something yesterday about toxic relationships and learning from your mistakes, my lawyer mentioned during our latest update call. And this morning, she quietly removed her relationship status. I almost felt sorry for Mark. Almost. But then I remembered his ha-ha after telling me he'd emptied our account, the casual cruelty of his texts mocking my age, the smug way he assumed I'd be helpless without him. Any flicker of sympathy died before it could take root, replaced by something much stronger, pride. Pride in my foresight, in the quiet strength I had nurtured over years, and in my ability to protect myself while he never saw me coming. The final divorce hearing was nothing like the triumphant showdown Mark had probably envisioned when he first sent that text. His cocky swagger was gone, replaced by barely contained desperation. Melissa, his soulmate, was nowhere to be found. According to the latest office gossip, she had quickly upgraded to a younger co-worker, one with a functioning credit score and no parental basement in his immediate future. Mark showed up wearing his old work clothes, his designer midlife crisis wardrobe long gone. Probably returned to scrape together some cash. His lawyer, clearly exhausted from trying to invent arguments where none existed, offered one last feeble attempt. "Your Honour," he said, "despite the separate property documentation, my client contributed to the growth of the boutique through moral support and..." "Moral support?" My lawyer's voice was razor sharp. Would that be like these text messages calling the boutique a little shop, or these social media posts where he refers to it as his wife's cute hobby? The judge had seen enough. The final settlement reflected exactly what I'd planned for. My house, my business, my separate assets, all protected. Mark walked away with his personal belongings, a rapidly depreciating car, and a box of regrets. "You've ruined my life," he hissed as we walked out of the courtroom. "I'm going to have to move back in with my parents." "No, Mark," I replied calmly. "You ruined your own life. I just made sure you couldn't ruin mine too." His mother stood in the courthouse lobby, ready to drive her 45-year-old son back to his childhood bedroom. The same man who mocked my age was now moving home, his once grand escape reduced to his parents' spare room. "You planned this all along," he accused. "You were just waiting for me to mess up." "No," I said, meeting his gaze steadily. "I just paid attention, and unlike you, I understood the value of keeping good records." His mother face flushed with embarrassment stepped between us. "That's enough, Mark. You've embarrassed yourself enough already." As they walked away, I heard her voice drifting back toward me. "A 20-year-old, emptying your joint account, sending her those texts? What were you thinking?" I didn't hear his answer. I didn't care. The next time my phone buzzed, it wasn't a desperate text from Mark. It was an order notification from my boutique's website. Life wasn't just moving forward, it was flourishing without him. 6 months later, my boutique had expanded to a second location, a milestone I celebrated quietly with my staff. Business was booming. The little shop Mark had dismissed as insignificant was now a thriving brand. I'd hired 3 more employees, launched a successful online store, and was in talks with a local business magazine for a feature story. Not about my divorce, but about my business acumen. Through mutual acquaintances, updates about Mark filtered in from time to time. He'd tried dating apps, but women his age weren't interested in a man living with his parents. Younger women, having heard about his spectacular implosion, avoided him entirely. Melissa had even posted screenshots of his frantic messages after she dumped him, warning her friends to steer clear. His professional life had crumbled too. HR at his company launched a formal investigation into his relationship with a subordinate. His long-anticipated promotion went to someone younger, someone with better judgment. When he filed a complaint claiming age discrimination, HR just added it to his already extensive personnel file. Mark's sister Amanda showed up at the boutique one afternoon, fingers tracing a silk scarf display. "I know we didn't believe you at first," she admitted, not meeting my eyes. "He played the victim so well. But then we saw the texts. We saw how he handled everything afterward, and we're ashamed we ever doubted you." I nodded, not needing or wanting her apology. My success didn't depend on their validation, but their admission was satisfying nonetheless. My lawyer kept me updated on Mark's increasingly desperate legal maneuvers. He filed motion after motion, trying to claw back any piece of the business or house he could. Every attempt was denied. His excuse for draining the account, that it was just a joke, was laughed out of court. The judge actually asked, my lawyer said, barely containing her glee, "Does adding ha-ha to a text make theft less illegal?" The boutique's success caught the attention of local media. Instead of the scorned wife angle Mark had expected, they framed me as a savvy entrepreneur who had navigated personal and professional storms with intelligence and grace. Young women starting their own businesses reached out for advice, not about marriage, but about protecting their dreams. "The best protection," I told them, "is preparation. And never ignore your gut." Mark's mother still called from time to time, especially after he made particularly bad choices. After losing most of his savings to a pyramid scheme, and then blowing what little he had left on online gambling, he'd come crawling back to his parents, still blaming everyone else for his downfall. "I don't know where we went wrong," she sighed. "We offered to help if he'd just take responsibility, but he blames you, blames Melissa, blames his old boss, anyone but himself." Her sadness was real, but I didn't offer comfort. Mark wasn't my burden anymore. My life was too full of possibility to spend any more time thinking about the weight I'd left behind. 1 year after the divorce, I opened my third boutique location. It was everything I'd dreamed. Bright, elegant, a reflection of my personal style. The local press covered the grand opening, but my story wasn't about divorce or revenge. It was about building a thriving business on my terms from the ground up. To my surprise, Melissa showed up at the opening, shifting uncomfortably as she approached me. "I owe you an apology," she said, her voice soft. "He told me so many lies about you, that you were cold, controlling, that you crushed his dreams. And then he tried the same things with me." I finished adjusting a display of sunglasses before responding. "Those weren't dreams, Melissa. They were excuses." She nodded, the truth clearly dawning on her. "He moved in after you froze the accounts. Said it was just temporary until he got his finances in order. 2 weeks in, he started pressuring me to get a bigger place, to take out a loan." I couldn't help but smile. "Let me guess. Everything was going to work out after his next big win?" "Exactly." She smiled ruefully. "I'm dating someone my age now. We're broke and living in a tiny apartment, but at least we're building something real." When she left, my assistant manager leaned in. "Was that but the girlfriend?" I shook my head. "Number that was just another woman who learned the same lesson I did." The framed screenshot of Mark's infamous breakup text still hangs in my office. Underneath it sits my latest Entrepreneur of the Year award, a reminder that sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's getting ahead. 2 years later, at the 5th anniversary celebration of my flagship boutique, I stood in front of my employees and loyal customers. I wasn't the scorned ex-wife Mark had tried to reduce me to. I was the owner of a multi-location, nationally recognized brand, a brand built on resilience, intelligence, and quiet, careful preparation. Through the grapevine, I heard Mark finally moved out of his parents' house into a cramped studio above a friend's garage. His dating profile still listed him as young at heart, and his profile picture was a heavily filtered shot from 2015. Melissa had become a successful social media consultant and, ironically, now counted my boutiques among her top clients. "You showed me how to build something real," she once told me. "Thank you for that." As I stood in the bustling boutique, champagne glass in hand, I realized something. Mark's text wasn't the end of my story, it was the beginning. He tried to shrink my world, but instead he set me free. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's building a life so full they become irrelevant.